wanted to go through a quick overview slash review of this awesome shader that I found off of Paulo Brabo's Twitter account. He posted it onto Blender Market and Gumroad, and it is very like colorful, expressive, and it gives kind of like more traditional vibes off of it, and that's kind of like the look that I'm looking for with science animation and art. I would highly suggest that if you're going to use this, that you pay the suggested amount, because I'm certain that he worked very hard on making sure that this shader worked as well as it possibly could for the general public. If you open up the example file, you'll see that it starts off with the Sturdy shader, the Sturdy Plus shader, and zooming around the Suzanne, you'll see that it's very like it has a lot of movement, it's very colorful, and there are a lot of different settings that you can change here within the shader tab itself. Upon first glance, it might be a little bit like overwhelming, but just play around with each of the individual like colors, bright A, bright B, C, D, so on and so forth, until you like achieve a look that you're content with. Going into the inner nodes in the shader tab, you can see there are quite a few groups that in settings that you can play around with. One of which being this massive color ramps, which just changes like how the colors interact with each other, bright A, B, C, D, so on and so forth. You can change the rotations from within here, outside of the general settings that are provided to you. And within the example file, there is another material. It's just general sturdy, and it's basically formatted the same, but you can go into the inner palettes and adjust like this inner color ramp with a bunch of different like colors here as you want, and totally adjust the relations of all of the different settings at the very top level that you want to. There are extra ramps that you can copy and paste as needed. So when you set up a new file, just append, find that example file that is provided upon download, navigate over to the material, and then select both of those materials, and they will be brought into whatever file you want to just play around with them in. Here I've assigned the material over to the cube, the default cube in the center, and I'm just going to do a really quick scene setup so that we can get a better idea of how this looks in 3D space with whatever HDRI I select. And because I want to like emphasize the cartoony look of this, I'm gonna select that freestyle stroke setting and activate it so that as soon as I render this entire thing, it'll composite and add on those additional strokes in post. And for the purposes of this review, I want to show how this material interacts with different meshes, such as the cube, sphere, and Suzanne, so we can see how it looks with different curvatures and such. So one of the first settings that you can play around with is the accent color, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It's like the main color that pops out. There's also the overlay color, and I have my own personal node adjustments that I wanted to add because I felt like it was kind of too strong for the main settings. affects the material surely is worth a lot. I'll add in my little bits of commentary as needed, but you can just look at the screen and see how each of the individual settings affects it. What I like about brushwork density is that it kind of like adds a more impressionistic aesthetic to the material itself, so play with that as you need to. The same thing goes for brush crunchiness. Like, I feel like this kind of gives it a more organic look, like the painter themselves is actually using a real paintbrush and not just lines. Wildness factor, I think, is like more distortion. The strokes rotation is for just like finer adjustments. If you don't like where a brush stroke is placed, you can adjust that. And then like a lot of these final adjustments that you can make, I feel like you can also do in the compositor. But if you don't want to do that extra work, it's just great to have all of these settings available to you straight from the shader material properties. Play around with this as needed. And I'd understand if that was like a lot to take in all at once, so here's just a visual aid of how all of those different settings affects the materials in video format. Replay it as you need to, or just go into the blend file and play around with it as you want to. Another fun thing with this shader is that you can adjust it just based off of how the lights in your scene are set up. I think that's one of the taglines in the description, paint with light, and it's quite true. If you add in different point lights or spotlights, you can dramatically change how the colors interact with each other, and it really is painting with light. You can do a lot more with this shader outside of the material settings, so I would just suggest experimenting around with it and getting funky with it, because it's awesome. It's really cool, especially for science visualization. Like, I think, personally, it has a lot of potential for science communication because it truly just does, like, add a lot of visual interest to whatever your topic is, i.e. like proteins, using the molecular visualization nodes that Brady Johnston has released a while ago. I will never stop singing its praises because it is just so easy to navigate through and to utilize, and just go look through its tutorials. They're very easy to understand, and it pairs up very nicely with this material. So if you're a scientist looking to have some fun with some new materials, definitely append this into your blend file. And within geometry nodes, whenever you select the style surface shader or whatever else visualization technique you use for your molecule, make sure that you change the material within geometry nodes, otherwise it will not apply to the object itself. Also save your work. Okay, thanks. There is a bit of a caveat with this approach, and it's that it really only works best with the style surface approach. By that I mean it doesn't really function as well with the ball and stick model, it doesn't really function as well with just the singular atoms method, nor does it really work for the bases and the backbone to an extent. You'll see what I'm talking about later. But anyways, what's showing on the screen is me setting up the scene. Now, as you've noticed, likely, it's that I'm currently using the style surface means of visualizing this. So just adjusting that molecular style here. And I will say that it kind of does work, but just depending on whatever message you're trying to send across to your audience, like, you can get kind of lost in the sauce of the aesthetics versus whatever you may be trying to communicate. Like here, you can't really tell the differences between each of the bases. You can't tell like which one's adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, even after you add in the specific like color assignments that are within the molecular node's material itself. And there is a way to do this. You just copy and paste that original material over into the Paulo Bravo's sample material. And with that color assignment that is brought in, you see here, to get the color from the geometry, just drag that into the accent color and you'll automatically get those assigned colors over here. But as you can see, you can't really tell what each of the base pairs are from each other. Like, the adenine light blue doesn't really come across very well, and the cytosine like hot pink is only visible like on certain sections of the DNA. So as it stands, just overall it's best to use the surface style modifier in order to depict whatever molecule you're wanting to visualize. At least with this particular shader, which I do think is really cool, and I think it is really pretty. Me just, you know, trying to set up the scene to showcase how this will look in 3D space. So this is my favorite part, adding in the freestyle strokes. So you're going to want to enable that in the rendering section, and then go into the, I believe it's like the layers tab, and just select whatever type of stroke style you want, and then adjust the alpha, the color, the thickness to whatever settings you wish. I do have a Gumroad pack where it has a couple of example strokes that you could use, but my go-to is adjusting the alpha and adding in a noise modifier and adjusting that from mapping from like linear to curve, and then changing the curve to be something kind of similar to this so that it gives it a more pencil-y look. If you let that render out, this is what it looks like. Ooh, it's kind of like pencil. Awesome. And it really emphasizes that cartoony, stylized aesthetic. And I think I wanted a little bit more detail, like showing where the ridges are, so I added in a suggestive contour thing, and you know, it's a little funky, it's fine, but a little bit too jagged for my taste, so adding a Bezier curve modifier to smooth those jagged edges out a bit. And just to further add a bit more shape to this little DNA bit, I'm going to add in another freestyle stroke thing by selecting the plus button and making sure that it applies only to the external contour. And for the geometry, making sure that I select the calligraphy option so that it gives like a nice kind of varied pencil stroke or pen stroke look to it. So now I'm just going to move on to really quick compositing. Yeah, I don't really do much in terms of these, just basically adding like a color to the background. And pro tip for any science artists out there, try not to use like pure white as a background because it is very jarring to the eyes, and yeah, it's just kind of harsh, so make it a bit more friendly to the viewer by choosing an off-white or something like that. Now you could kind of conclude the tutorial / overview from here for science visualization, but I wanted to animate this DNA bit a little bit, so adding in a set position node and then one of those random noise by position nodes that is included within the molecular pack. And just making sure that the amplitude value is very low so that it doesn't look like way too wiggly and crazy looking, and having it animate by seconds of the animation, and put in a math node to just adjust how quickly that changes over time. and I do want to showcase how this can present itself in 3D space. So just gonna add in a couple of rotation frames, just a really easy, simple spin around 360, just to show off how this shader looks from all points of view here. Now that that's all set up, just render one frame of it just to make sure it looks good, and yeah, looks great. Move on to the next part, and for me, here, it's going to be adding in a grease pencil thing. So add in a grease pencil empty stroke, and make sure when you do that, that stroke frame is at the very beginning of the animation, unless you want to, like, you know, add it in partway through. Navigate over to the draw section and change your pen settings or your pencil settings as need be. And as like a personal aside, I feel like grease pencil has a lot of potential for science communication, just because not only does it work like within 2D, like just regular traditional animation, but it also works within a 3D space. So I don't really explore it too much here, but you can move around the camera to see that there is some dimensionality to each of these strokes here. So after I add in my label here, I'm going to add in a modifier off to the side and just add a little bit of like a set position / noise modifier, changing how the thickness varies over time. You can see you can have like a lot of variation there, and changing the amount of noise that occurs with each frame. Also going to add in a smooth modifier to just smooth everything out, interpolate the strokes a little bit more, make it a bit prettier. And last but not least, which is a really fun and automatic one, the build modifier. So I can start it from the very beginning and have it like construct my grease pencil object through however long I want the animation to last for. Now here we get to the limitations of freestyle stroke. You see that line there? Yeah, I don't want that. I'm sure there's some sort of weird calculation going on with the mesh surface and that it's coinciding with how the freestyle strokes are calculated. I haven't found a good way of fixing this within the freestyle stroke settings themselves, but the way that I try to get around it is by navigating over to geometry nodes and then messing around with the molecules settings from there, and I'll show that in a second. So you see these settings here that are labeled underneath the surface node? Yeah, so you can change the scale radii, the probe size, the surface smoothing, the quality, any of those by like a small amount such that the mesh slightly changes, and most of the time it'll make it so that the like whatever bug or issue is occurring with the freestyle stroke goes away. So it does add a little bit of additional work at the moment of release of this video. Like maybe future iterations will be resolved, but yeah, that's just how it is right now. And it's kind of like the most headache inducing part, but it's fine for now. So at this point, I'm pretty confident with what I have, so I'm just selecting the output file path for where I want all of my PNG files to save, so that after everything is all said and done, I can collate them all and create a nice, cute little video of everything. And here is that video of everything all together. Woo! Nice. Spiffy. Pretty cool, am I right? Yeah, I really like how this all turns out. And again, there is a limitation within using freestyle strokes. It's just that weird, like, additional long extended line that can occur. But if you follow what I said before with just like adjusting a bit of the minutia within the geometry nodes, you should be able to get by and everything should look fine. So yeah, that's my review of this shader. It's amazing, it's gorgeous, and I just love playing with it. It's not photorealistic in any means, but you know, it gives your subject a lot of interest, and I think that that's super essential when you're trying to like get information out about anything in science communication and you just want to bring your audience in, like a general population. So yeah, hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.